VE Schwab is an author of both fantasy and children's books. She's won 2 Goodreads awards and been nominated for a whole host of other awards as well. I know what you're thinking. Oh, finally, some guy's here to explain the writing advice of an accomplished and award-winning woman author, thank God. Just what the world's been missing. I get it completely, and if you'd rather hear the info straight from Victoria Schwab herself, then there's links in the description for her old blog and her own YouTube channel. If, however, you want to see just how the hell I think I can add to anything she's said, feel free to stick around and see. So here's the first piece of advice. It's from an interview where she was asked for the reasons why she approaches writing in a variety of different styles and formats. Number 1. Honestly, the motivation to change things up is twofold. The first reason is so that I don't get bored. I sit with stories for months, if not years, before anyone ever sees them, so I want to make sure I'm challenging myself and having fun. The second reason is so that my work isn't comparable to itself. I don't want readers to be able to hold up 2 of my works and make an apples to apples comparison. My creative process, however, doesn't change, no matter if I'm writing a single POV, linear novel like Gallant, or a multiple POV, multiple timeline story like Shades of Magic. I always find the ending first, then work towards that. I thought this was interesting for a couple of reasons. First, I like that she's just advocating for just being creative here, trying things, doing things differently, changing things up. I think that's a really good thing for any writer to try, not only because it keeps the writing process interesting and fun, which is arguably one of the most important things for us, but I also think changing things exposes us to new challenges. It allows us to take a shot at something different and to think differently and see how we deal with that. Whether that leads to success or failure, either way, I think we gain something. We win or we learn, but one way or another, I think we come out stronger for it. What we learn from experimenting can inform our normal writing, for want of a better word. It could help us add to that and expand it a bit and make it a whole lot better, even if the new kind of writing that we're trying doesn't itself work out, but it might. The other reason I found this interesting is that she mentions finding her ending first and working towards that, but you know what? Hold that thought for a minute while I introduce myself, and then I'll bring up the next quote. If you're new here, I'm Kieran. I'm a writer and a freelance editor, and I love helping writers tell their stories while having fun. So thanks for being here. Here's that next quote. Number 2, I think the best advice I can give is this. Find an ending that excites you and write towards it. The main reason writers abandon projects is because they don't know where they're going or the distance isn't measurable. But if you have an ending that excites you, then on good days, you can't wait to write. And on bad days, you won't quit because you know there's an end. This is great advice, I think, but what I love about it specifically is that it contains a point I've never considered before, which I'll come on to. But generally, I write this way too. I think up the ending and write towards it. For novels, this is always how it works for me. This is my structure. That's my story scaffolding. Find the North Star, keep my eye on it, and then just walk, crossing any obstacles that I meet along the way. All of that, as I mentioned before, is just a preference thing though. Other writers won't work that way. Like all things writing related, this is just my opinion and absolutely nothing more. So if you work a different way, it's not a problem. The part of this thought that I hadn't considered before though was that an ending can be a source of motivation. VE Schwab is absolutely right here, I think. On bad days, it's a light at the end of the tunnel. It's a sign that at some point, this will all end. Sometimes that's essential, and maybe I'm not a hugely optimistic person, admittedly, but sometimes writing a novel can be a real grind, so having a finish line in front of you, no matter how distant, is helpful. It's also an indicator of where to stop. If I was to write a book that was entirely stream of consciousness sort of fashion, and make it all up as I go, how would I know when to stop writing? I'm sure I'd figure it out, but if there's streamers and a cake and a banner that says the end already set out, then it's a bit more of a clue. Number 3, when asked what's your advice for writer's block, here's what Victoria Schwab said. Figure out why you're blocked. Are you stuck because you don't know what happens next? Are you bored or are you scared? If you don't know what happens next, step back and figure it out. If you're bored, that's a larger issue because you need to be your work's first fan. Do whatever you need to in order to fall in love with your story again. And when in doubt, always amp the tension. If you're scared, force yourself through. You can't fix a blank page. This is all really good advice. I often think of being stuck as this one state caused by one problem. We're just stuck. It's writer's block. What are you going to do? But the writer's block that I have might not be the same as the one you have, and it might not be the same as the next one that we have either. Finding the root of that block then seems like it would be really important and really helpful. If you don't know how to move forward, her advice is to step back and figure it out. This often works for me, and everyone will vary on this, of course, but when I hear step back, I take that to mean really step back. You can just go for a walk and hope that fixes something, But if that doesn't do the trick, take a week off or something. Your novel won't fall apart if you don't add to it for a week. And if it does, maybe that's an indication there's a bigger problem than writer's block there anyway. Plus, it's really important to know that there's more to making progress with a novel than just increasing the word count. In fact, I've added lots of words to novels before and actually taken myself backwards in terms of overall progress, so don't assume that they're the same thing. Taking time to figure out the path ahead counts as progress, so don't be afraid to stop the pattern of writing and interrupt it when you need to. And if you're bored with your story, she says, do whatever you've got to do to fall in love with your story again. To add to that, I would say take yourself back to the moment you first came up with the idea for your story. Go back there, grip onto what made you excited to write it, and follow that thread for as long as you can through what you've written. Keep checking if it's still there. If it isn't, maybe you just need to backtrack a bit and pick it up again. And if you're scared, she suggests just pushing through it. I don't have a whole lot to add to that, other than to maybe admit that I'm not the most daring or most courageous writer. I don't delve deep into my psyche when I write, so I guess I'm unlikely to run into this issue myself. I'm sure this is entirely privilege speaking, but it just doesn't feel like me or the kind of writer that I am. But definitions of scared may vary, and there's definitely plenty of scary stuff in the process of writing any novel. So let's move on to something less scary, something that a lot of writers actually find cozy and comforting. Number 4. I think fanfiction is a wonderful way to show enthusiasm and appreciation for a series. I love when readers feel strongly enough about a book or a character or a world that they don't want to let go. So long as it's not being created for profit, I welcome it. I've talked about fanfiction a couple of times before, specifically in my George R.R. Martin video, I think, but since I made that video, my thoughts haven't changed exactly, but they have evolved a bit. I used to say, don't write fanfiction, not for elitist reasons or because I think it's inherently bad. I don't. I just thought that if you're a writer who's capable of writing fanfiction, then you're probably a writer who's capable of writing original fiction. So don't miss the opportunity to write something entirely of your own. While I still agree with that in a lot of ways, I also think that if fan fiction brings you joy and that's your thing, then why does there need to be more to it? I often talk about progressing and developing your writing and this and that, probably too much, really. But it struck me recently that maybe some writers aren't looking for that, or they don't need it. Maybe they found something they love and they're just going to keep doing it. So today I find myself more in line with VE Schwab here. Don't monetize someone else's creation. That's not cool. Corporations and their AI bull are already plagiarizing enough of our work. But beyond that, if it brings you joy, write fan fiction. I don't write it, but is there a world where I could see myself writing like Severance or Lost fan fiction, something like that? Yeah, I get it. So, write what brings you happiness. Number 5, when writers, aspiring, debut and established, ask for insight, I always say just keep writing. And I know that sounds like a very Dory thing to say, but the fact of the matter is, if you've written a book and it doesn't sell and you want to keep going, you need to write another. If you've written a book and it does sell but it doesn't do well, you need to write another. If you've written a book and it does well, you need to write another. All roads lead to writing, and this is good because when it comes to publishing, very little is in your control. But the one thing you can control is the book, the words that you put on the page. I really like the perspective here coming from someone who's clearly experienced all of these individual states of being a writer. I'm sure that most of the writers watching this video and the one making it are unpublished. And if publishing is your aim, it's kind of nice to know that how you're feeling now is sort of the same as VE Schwab might have been feeling, even having gone through all of this and experienced what we might not have. Huh? That was a big sentence, but the gist of it is the answer is just write another book or write another story. All of that other stuff is separate. And since we all, I'd expect, enjoy writing stories, there's a kind of simplicity to that. I really like what she said about writing being the only thing we can actually control. That's comforting to me. I might not always be in control of my own writing, in fact, but sometimes I am. And it's good to know that maybe we don't have to control all of that other stuff as well. It's freeing to just be able to let go of it. Like I said before about the way I don't plan my books, but I know the ending and I follow that North Star. The same applies here. The North Star is just keep writing, stay on course and see where you end up. If you want a bit of practice at that, here's a video I made where I wrote a quick story based entirely on random prompts that you can follow along with if you want. You could write a story today, even if you weren't planning on it. So thanks so much for watching as always, and happy writing.